Welcome back to Harmonic Resonance 101. Today I want to try something pretty chill, pretty unstructured. I don't really have a plan even at this moment, besides just a rough idea of what I want to talk about. And I plan to do a lot of these type of videos where they're a little more free form, a little less structured than some of the plans I have, where I'll also make a lot of videos probably that are more structured. However, until I can build more of a structured format for those videos, I see myself making a lot of these types of videos where I can leave some room for my intuition to explore and my unconscious mind to process ideas and thoughts out loud in a way that will hopefully be beneficial to someone, even if that someone is just me. So, to start, I want to kind of use a piece of writing I did recently as a jumping off point because it ties in a lot of different things that I've been contemplating and discussing with various people. And hopefully, it's intellectually stimulating for someone out there besides just me. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to maintain any sort of collection of human beings in a communal relationship for any length of time? A lot of examples we can point to throughout the development of human civilization, from the earliest groups of hunter-gatherers and what little information we have historically of how they came together and begun working together to achieve a common purpose rather than being isolated small bands. They began to form larger communities in order to be more secure, and also because it facilitated a greater um, likelihood of achieving goals that they all had in common, namely survival and ideally some sort of thriving, some sort of flourishing and growth. And so this is a big theme in my mind when you look at human civilization. This idea of units joining together into groups that make up larger units, which themselves make up larger units. And over time, our civilization has gotten more and more complex until we find ourselves in the current age where it is almost mind-numbingly complex when one sits and meditates on the extent of our human civilization. However, there seems to be another related dynamic that seems to pervade our history as well. So, in the same manner that we have this tendency towards order and stability and things coming together to build something greater than themselves, there's also this pattern we can notice throughout our history where there also seems to be some sort of drive to break things apart when they get too big. So as things get more and more complex, there becomes more and more opportunity for chaos to enter into the order. and compromise it in some way to essentially exploit the cracks and the weaknesses in the established order. And if the order is not stable enough, if it's not resilient enough to resist that chaos, then there are some negative outcomes typically. And I relate this very much in my mind to the story of the fall in Genesis. A very fascinating story to me. Whether or not you believe it describes historical events, I think it has so much symbolism packed into such a short story that it's almost inevitable in my mind that there's some very deep truth about our species tied up in this myth. So I'm sure whoever's listening to this has heard the story, but briefly, Adam and Eve are in the garden. Everything is as it should be. They're in union with God. They have no problems that we are aware of by reading the story. It seems everything is perfect. Everything is in unity. There is no division. There is no separation. Everything seems to be working together in a harmonious relationship. And then, of course, we all know that a serpent enters the Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve are just vibing. They're just doing their thing, just chilling with God, naming the animals, enjoying probably a pretty idyllic life, we can imagine. And this serpent shows up. The serpent, of course, is a symbol for the chaos coming into the order to disrupt it. And the serpent tells Adam and Eve that the commandment God gave them is a lie, essentially, that it's not true. Because you see, God told Adam and Eve that they could eat of any fruit in the garden except one, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And up until the serpent arrived, they were probably fine with that. They didn't see any need for it. They were, taken care of. Everything was as it should be. They didn't have any lack. So they didn't have a desire for something they thought they were missing because they weren't missing anything. So the serpent tells Eve that God is being dishonest, that he doesn't want them to have the fruit because they will become like God, knowing good and evil. And as we all know, Eve decides to eat the fruit and give some to Adam, and consequently they are cast out of the garden. They are separated from God because of what the Bible calls sin. Now, this is kind of the traditional reading of the fall, but of course, there are alternate interpretations. Gnosticism has a whole different view of it. Um, and then, of course, I'm sure there's as many interpretations as there are people. But something I find very interesting about it is this idea of it being a very symbolic story describing our advancement as humans. both on an individual level as we grow as children into adults, and as a species, I believe. A really interesting way I like to approach the story of the fall is to think of it as being about order versus chaos, which is related to duality, this concept that our reality is made up of various spectrums of opposing forces that are responsible for the manifestation of our reality. You can think of light and dark, good and evil, up and down, black and white. All of these dualities exist as a spectrum, essentially. And a way to connect this to another type of mythology, Norse mythology, deals with this uh, giant serpent called Jörmungandr. And Jörmungandr is referred to as the world serpent, or the basically the name roughly translates as the giant serpent, or the basically a big snake or elongated being. And traditionally in Norse mythology, Jormungandr is seen as circling the earth in the ocean, biting its own tail, which is a reference to this concept Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail, which is a symbol of the underlying unity and oneness of all reality. Just fascinating concepts to me that link all of these different philosophies and mythological frameworks that have been built over the centuries of our existence. So for now, I'd like to keep these videos roughly about 10-15 minutes long. I don't want to go too much longer than that with these. So for now, I'll stop there and we'll speak again soon. Harmonic resonance, aligning vibrations, elevating consciousness.